had if sick stuff was going on.
Point blank shot him.
There was a saying, you want to kill somebody, do it in Belmont County.
Wow, welcome back. That was a clip from Ice Cold Case, a podcast dedicated to solving the 2002 murder of J.C. McGhee after his case went cold. And it's hosted by his very own daughter, Madison. She's a little over a year into the series and working tirelessly to solve his death. And she's joining us now to share her story. Please welcome to the show, Madison McGhee.
Hi. Hi, Madison. Thank you for being here. You were only 6 when your father died. What were you originally told about his death?
So when it first happened, my family told me that my dad had a heart attack and that's how he passed away. I think for various reasons, I was so young. I think it's hard to sort of understand the magnitude of murder at that age. My sister was home at the time, so they told me that she tried to call 911, but he had already passed. So the context was a little different, but sort of the storyline was similar to what really happened. I just didn't know the magnitude of what actually had occurred that morning.
So when did you find out that the heart attack wasn't the truth?
When I was 16, almost 10 years later, I was visiting my family in Ohio on my dad's side with my mom, and I had what I can only describe as sort of an instinctual reaction to seeing a family member that made me ask my mom very specific questions about my dad's death. And that led to her sort of breaking down and telling me the truth, which was still very difficult to process. And I wonder if at the time the case had been solved, if I would have known much sooner, perhaps they would have told me right away, you know, because then you have that closure that the person who did this is behind bars. But for 10 years up until that point, they hadn't caught the killer. So my mom then had to also tell me that my dad wasn't just murdered, that it's an unsolved case and there was no closure for my dad's story.
Jeez.
Well, you know, that's what I wanted to ask you about. You, better than anybody, would know this. Why do you think this case has gone cold for so long?
I think there's a lot of different reasons. I think that smaller towns are under-resourced. They don't have the same technology that bigger cities have. They don't have the same number of people on the force that bigger cities have, investigators specifically dedicated to homicide, cold cases. But I also think that it would be naive of me to not acknowledge the sort of racial profiling that exists today, and the fact that my dad was a Black drug dealer turned informant in 2002. He's shot in his home, doesn't really impact the greater community because it wasn't in a public space. It's much easier to just brush it under the rug and say, we tried, we couldn't solve it, and move on, versus giving it the time and attention that perhaps it would have gotten if he was a white missing woman in America. Those seem to just get more attention. And I think that's, you know, it goes all together hand in hand.
So Madison, you kind of led me into my question. Would you say that was the biggest obstacle in trying to solve this case, or were there other things going on as well?
I think that's definitely one of the biggest obstacles. I think the biggest thing I've struggled with, because it was so long ago, was getting people to care. It's very, very difficult. When I started making phone calls, hey, I think I'm going to make this podcast. I could really use the help of a more established production company or someone who has the infrastructure to really help me make this show. It was met with, well, your dad's case isn't really a banner case. There's no headline that we can really form from this. It's just a drug dealer who got killed in Ohio. And I think that was the biggest struggle, was getting people to care, because that ultimately puts pressure on the police department. And that's how a lot of these cases are getting solved. So I knew that that was an avenue I wanted to explore, but getting people invested was really a struggle.
I'm glad that you're getting people invested, though, including our audience and us. Do you think that you'll be able to solve your father's murder?
I really think so. And solve has different meanings, right? Do I think it will go all the way to trial? Perhaps. That requires, you know, the police department, the prosecutor's office, and evidence to all sort of work together. Do I think I'm going to find out who killed my dad? Absolutely. I think at some point maybe very soon, I will be able to go to bed at night knowing that I know what happened to my dad. And then, the legal process will have to be a whole nother set of red tape I have to cross, but I do believe that I'm going to find out who killed my dad.
Wow, Madison, I can only imagine how proud your dad is looking down on you and hopefully guiding you. Thank you for joining us today. DBL Nation, be sure to listen to Ice Cold Case wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes premiere bi-weekly on Wednesdays. Thank you again, Madison. Best of luck. Hopefully we can have you back on when you do solve it. Okay?
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Thank you.